You know what's interesting about the most sensitive people you've ever met? They probably didn't look the way you expected them to. They weren't crying at every little thing. They weren't fragile, weak, or falling apart at the first sign of pressure. They weren't the ones asking for special treatment. In fact, if you passed them on the street, you might think they were completely fine. But if you sat with them for an hour, really sat with them, you'd feel something different. A weight they're carrying that most people never notice. A way of absorbing the world that doesn't switch off. And here's what most people get wrong. We've been taught that sensitivity is a weakness, something to toughen up out of, something that makes you less capable, less strong, less ready for the real world. But the research tells a completely different story. The habits that actually signal a highly sensitive nervous system are often the very same habits the world calls dramatic, exhausting, or too much. Today we're going deep into 10 of them. And by the end, you might realize that what you've been trying to fix about yourself was never a flaw at all. There's a paradox at the center of human sensitivity that almost nobody talks about. The more sensitive a person is, the more their internal world diverges from what the external expects of them. They absorb more, they feel more, they notice more, and because of that, they behave in ways that look strange to people who aren't processing the world at the same intensity. Think about that for a moment. The very behaviors that make a sensitive person seem too much to the average person are often the direct result of a nervous system working at a higher resolution. It's not that they're trying to be difficult. It's that they cannot help but absorb the world differently, and that absorption leaves fingerprints on everything they do. So let's look at those fingerprints. The first few may feel familiar, but stay with me, because the ones toward the end are the ones most people completely misunderstand about you. Habit 1. Crying at things that shouldn't make you cry. The first habit is one almost every sensitive person has done, but very few admit to. Tearing up during a commercial. Crying at a stranger's kindness on the street. Feeling your throat tighten during a song you've heard 100 times before. To anyone watching, it looks disproportionate. Society already expects people to save their tears for real tragedies. Crying over a small moment doesn't fit that picture. But here's what's actually happening. When your nervous system processes emotional information at a higher intensity, small moments carry the same weight that big moments carry for other people. Psychologist Elaine Aron, who pioneered research into what she called the highly sensitive person, found that roughly 15 to 20% of people have a nervous system that processes sensory and emotional input more deeply than average. It's not a disorder. It's a trait called sensory processing sensitivity. You're not crying because you're weak. You're crying because your system doesn't have a shallow setting. Have you ever apologized for tearing up over something small? What if that moment wasn't something to apologize for at all? What if it was proof that your nervous system was doing exactly what it was designed to do? Habit 2. Needing recovery time after socializing. The second habit is one I suspect many of you are living right now without realizing why. Coming home from a perfectly nice gathering and needing hours, sometimes a full day, of complete silence to feel like yourself again. You've probably been told your entire life that this means you don't like people, that you're antisocial, that something is wrong with how you connect. But psychological research tells a very different story. Studies on sensory processing sensitivity have repeatedly found that highly sensitive nervous systems absorb far more environmental data in a social setting than most. Tone of voice, micro-expressions, shifts in mood, unspoken tension in the room, all at once, all the time. It's not that the gathering was bad. It's that your nervous system was working overtime the entire time you were there, and now it needs space to process everything it took in. During the interaction, you were pulled in 100 directions by every subtle signal in the room. But afterward, your mind needs to descend into quiet to actually finish processing what it absorbed. You're not broken for needing a day alone after seeing people you love. You might just be the kind of person whose nervous system refuses to move on until it's had the space to actually settle. Habit 3. Getting overwhelmed by environments other people don't even notice. Here's one that will immediately make some of you feel seen. A fluorescent light that bothers no one else. A scratchy tag in a shirt that has to come out immediately. A background hum that other people say they don't even hear. People especially judge this as oversensitivity, as being high maintenance, as making a big deal out of nothing. We've been trained to associate toughness with virtue, the ability to just push through and not notice. But a substantial body of research on sensory processing sensitivity found that highly sensitive nervous systems detect subtle sensory input, light, sound, texture, smell, at a threshold most people never reach. Why? Because a highly sensitive nervous system isn't filtering out the world the way an average one does. It's taking in more of it all the time, whether it wants to or not. And here's what outsiders miss. Even in that overwhelm, there is a reason. The sensitive person can often tell you exactly which sound or light or texture is the source, because their attention is genuinely tracking it. The irritation is only an overreaction to someone who isn't receiving the same signal. Your discomfort in that room isn't a character flaw. It's evidence that your nervous system is picking up on something real. Now, I want to pause here, because the first 3 habits share something in common. They all happen inside your own body. They're the private signatures of a nervous system in motion. The things you feel when no one is watching. But here's where it gets truly fascinating. The next set of habits show up in how highly sensitive people relate to the world around them, to other people, to society, to the unspoken rules everyone else seems to follow without question. And these are the ones that get them misunderstood the most. Because when your nervous system works differently, it doesn't just change how you feel, it changes how you connect. And that disconnect, that's where the real story begins. Habit 4. Absorbing other people's emotions as your own. There is a particular kind of person who walks into a room and immediately knows something is wrong before anyone says a word. Not because they're nosy, not because they're guessing, because they can feel it. She's been called too sensitive, too reactive, too easily affected by other people's moods. She's been told she should build thicker skin, stop taking things on, learn to separate herself from other people's feelings, and she's internalized it, wondering if there's something wrong with her for feeling so porous. Let me tell you what's actually happening. Researchers studying empathic accuracy and emotional contagion have found that some nervous systems mirror the emotional states of people around them far more strongly than others, picking up not just what someone says, but the felt sense underneath it. This gets mistaken for being overly emotional. But it's not weakness, it's a nervous system so attuned to others that it responds to their internal state as if it were partly its own. It's exhausting, but it's also the exact mechanism behind real compassion. If you've ever been called too sensitive for feeling someone else's pain before they even named it, this one's for you. Habit 5 and 6. Replaying small interactions plus refusing to do things halfway. 2 habits that often travel together. First, the replaying. You said something in a meeting 3 days ago and you're still turning it over. Did that come out wrong? Did I sound short with them? Was that joke okay? People around you move on in minutes. You're still there, hours later. But here's what's actually happening. Your nervous system isn't malfunctioning by holding on to it. It's running a deeper social processing loop, because it registered more of the interaction in the first place, the pause before they answered, the slight shift in their tone, details other people never even encoded to begin with. It's not overthinking for no reason. It's processing information most people didn't collect. And then the refusing to do things halfway. Highly sensitive people often cannot bring themselves to do a quick and dirty version of something that matters to them. Not because they're perfectionists for the sake of it, but because doing something poorly costs them more emotionally than doing nothing at all. She isn't difficult for wanting it done right. She's the one who actually notices what right looks like. Habit 7. Feeling physically affected by other people's pain. There's a particular kind of ache that comes with watching someone else struggle and feeling it in your own chest, your own stomach, your own body, not just your mind. Because when someone tough shrugs off another person's bad news, they're being realistic. When a sensitive person feels physically affected by it, something is wrong with them. The ability to feel another person's distress somatically, in your body, not just cognitively, is strongly linked to high interoceptive awareness, the brain's capacity to notice internal bodily signals. It requires the nervous system to register another person's state and translate it into a felt physical response, almost instantly. Highly sensitive people often find themselves in this strange position. Their reaction is too visible, too immediate, too physical, for a world that prefers pain to stay theoretical. It's not that they're trying to make it about themselves. It's that their body responds to suffering before their mind even has a chance to intellectualize it. And here's something I find absolutely fascinating. This same capacity, The nervous system's ability to register someone else's internal state as physical information is also what makes highly sensitive people extraordinarily good at knowing when someone needs help before they ask for it. Their compassion and their exhaustion come from the same source. Habit 8 and 9, chronic guilt plus avoidance of conflict, the twin burdens. Until this point, most of the habits I've described might sound almost beautiful. The depth, the empathy, the attunement. But now we enter territory that's harder to romanticize, because these next two habits are the ones that actually hurt. Here's what nobody tells you. A highly sensitive person doesn't just feel guilty when they've actually done something wrong. They feel guilty for existing inconveniently, for taking up space, for having needs, for saying no. They replay the moment they disappointed someone. Did I let them down? Was I too much? Too distant? They have learned, often painfully, that the world reads their sensitivity as a burden on other people, and so their mind runs every scenario, apologizing in advance for feelings they haven't even had yet. Research on rejection sensitivity shows that highly sensitive nervous systems register the possibility of disapproval far more intensely than others, sometimes responding to an imagined slight with the same neural activation as an actual one. It's thorough. It keeps them attuned to relationships in ways others miss, but it's also exhausting. And then conflict avoidance. Highly sensitive people often avoid confrontation not from cowardice, but from a nervous system that processes conflict as a full-body event, not just an argument. The gap between the calm they crave and the friction conflict brings feels so wide that staying silent feels safer than speaking up, even when speaking up is exactly what's needed. This is not weakness. This is a nervous system that feels the full cost of disharmony before anyone else in the room does. If you've ever apologized for a conflict you didn't even start, I want you to hear something. The same mechanism that makes you want to smooth things over is the mechanism that makes you the person others trust to hold space for hard conversations, once you learn to stay in them instead of fleeing them. Habit 10, the daydreamer's mind. And finally, the 10th habit. Sitting in a room full of small talk, physically present, nodding, making the right sounds, but internally aching for the conversation to go somewhere real. Psychologists call this a low tolerance for superficiality. But what's actually happening is that a highly sensitive nervous system finds shallow interaction understimulating in a specific way, not boring exactly, but hollow, like consuming a meal with no nutrients in it. The person who goes quiet during small talk isn't rude and isn't judging the room. Their nervous system is simply waiting for a moment of real contact, and it can't fully engage until it finds one. And if you've ever been asked, why do you always make things so deep? You already know the flicker of guilt that follows. What you may not know is that the same mechanism that pulls you toward depth is the mechanism behind your most meaningful relationships. So, here we are. 10 habits, 10 fingerprints of a nervous system that works differently. And I want to leave you with something, not just a list, but a reframe. The world will always label what it doesn't understand. It will call your tears weakness. It will call your need for space antisocial. It will call your guilt irrational, your depth exhausting, your empathy too much. But those labels are not the truth. They're just the limit of someone else's threshold. Every habit we've talked about today shares a common thread. They are not malfunctions. They are the natural byproducts of a nervous system processing at a higher resolution, absorbing more, feeling more deeply, requiring more meaning than the environment consistently offers. That's not oversensitivity. That's a different kind of strength entirely. And for those of you watching this, the ones who've been told you're too much and not enough in the same breath, I want you to hear this clearly. Your sensitivity was never your weakness. It was always the quietest kind of strength. Drop a comment with the number of the habit that hit closest to home. I'd love to know which one found you. And don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the next video. Goodbye, and see you in the next one.